Okay, so technically I couldn't find a creepypasta movie this time around, but I got the next best thing. Let's get a little bit of backstory on this before we get started. So, Crybaby Lane was a made-for-TV Nickelodeon movie made back in 2000, and it aired on October 28th, right around Halloween. So naturally, it was meant to be a kid-friendly, scary movie. But then, for 11 years, it vanished. An entire movie on a primetime channel like Nickelodeon completely disappeared, like it never even happened. Naturally, this got people wondering what the hell happened to the movie that made network executives never want to air it, put it on DVD, or even mention it ever again. Some people say it was because the movie was simply too frightening for children, and Nickelodeon scrubbed it from the face of the earth. With no recordings, it remained a piece of lost media for over a decade. Over time, people started to get real curious and creative with the mystery surrounding this movie. Not only were people going through great efforts to actually find the movie, but over on our side of the internet, they were weaving stories of horror about what lurked inside this supposedly child-friendly film. The most notorious of these is the creepypasta story of the same name, Crybaby Lane. The story was apparently written in February of 2011, a mere 6 months before the actual film was rediscovered by Reddit users. Congratulations, Reddit, you finally did something cool. So now that you know the story, I thought I'd do something special for this Halloween. It's double feature time. We're not only going to look at Crybaby Lane the creepypasta, but also Crybaby Lane the movie. And we're gonna see which one is the better and scarier story. Let's start off with the pasta so we have a point of reference for once we get to the actual movie. The story starts off with our main character getting an internship at Nickelodeon Studios. No. Okay, PTSD aside, a bit of character history is given here saying that he's majoring in screenwriting for cartoons and children's programming, so this is a big opportunity for him since he kinda hates his current job. That's at least more to chew on than Squidward's suicide, but I'm still getting bad flashbacks as a result of this. There's oddly no segue into talking about the movie. It's just brought up at the start of the next paragraph with no context, which feels a bit odd. Almost like it would have been better to start the story off here. In any case, he says that the original Crybaby Lane that was broadcast on TV in 2000 will never be seen again. Nickelodeon probably doesn't have it anymore, and if they do, they're in some secret vault with all the deleted episodes of Ren and Stimpy and the never before mentioned episodes of Spongebob. I have no idea what he's talking about here, so I had to look it up. There are some episodes of Ren and Stimpy that were banned from airing on Nickelodeon for one reason or another, but I'm clueless on this Spongebob thing. If they're never before mentioned, then how are we supposed to have any context for that? No one's ever mentioned them. Unless he's honest to God talking about Squidward's suicide, because if that's the case, then I'm just fucking done, man. He says that if anyone does have the original movie, it's the director, Peter Lauer, and he'll probably have it displayed with all his snuff films. Now, credit where it's due, Peter Lauer is actually the director of Crybaby Lane, and he's had a pretty extensive career in television directing, which is kind of where I end up having problems with this concept. He makes something as horrible as whatever is about to come up, that's so bad it's being put on the same level as snuff films, and he just goes back to working TV like nothing happened? Listen, I get that Hollywood is a terrible industry that lets horrible people get away with awful things so frequently that it's basically the norm. But I think this is going a step too far. I can only imagine this pretty normal dude reading this story that's constantly lambasting him and calling him a sick fuck and being really emotionally hurt by it. It's just an idea that's funny to me. Anyway, our hero gets hired and put on the production team for Crybaby Lane. Apparently, there's only 4 people on the production team who get regularly cycled out to keep things fresh, all with the exception of our main character for some reason. I feel like the more details this story is trying to give in terms of production, the more I have a hard time believing any of it. Not only is that a remarkably small number of people to work on even a TV movie, hell, it's a small number of people to work on a web series on YouTube, but constantly swapping them out would just kill production time. The studio executives would never tolerate something like this. At best, they'd hire a new director, and at worst the entire project would be scrapped. Though, even if the latter were true, I'm sure there would still be creepypasta stories written about it. So production on the movie begins, and it's slow going. They have a year to get it out, but only the first 15 minutes of the script have been written. What? That's not even the director's job unless he's a writer-director. Not to mention, a screenplay or script is usually what you're gonna have done first, since it's usually the least time and labor-intensive part of production. And it's what you end up pitching to the studio to begin with. Sure, there's movies where scripts are written as production is moving swiftly along, which seems to be the case in Marvel movies, especially recently, but guess what? Those ones usually turn out to be shit, which is why it's not the standard. The point is, studio higher-ups wouldn't go to a TV director, tell him, hey, we want a TV movie out by next Halloween, go nuts, and leave him high and dry with no script, no cast, and nothing but the studio interns to work with. That's not how any of this works. I would probably be driven insane by these conditions and want to murder everyone on set. So as far as I'm concerned, Peter Lauer is the victim here. In any case, they're working with a fairly simple premise of two brothers who accidentally unleash a demon and try to set things right. Simple enough, but Lauer wants to push the envelope on just how scary he can make it. Far scarier than anything Courage the Cowardly Dog or Are You Afraid of the Dark could ever come up with. Man, the late 90s and early 2000s were really just the golden age for scary kids media, huh? I wonder if the actual movie will end up living up to that. Anyway, Lauer seems to keep getting really high charisma roles because he keeps throwing in more and more morbid ideas, like the little brother dying halfway through the movie because he randomly gets isekai'd by a dump truck, and our boy is the only one who can make a perception check that tells him he's fucking crazy. Why Lauer ended up cycling out everyone in the production staff except the literal one guy who could see he was a psycho is beyond me. Apparently, Lauer also pushes really hard for cannibalism in the movie, which, let's be real, is just another case of a writer barely disguising their fetish. To add more fetish fuel to the fetish fire, he says that the movie will now focus on the legend of a pair of Siamese twins, suggesting that if a pair of conjoined twins were starving, the surviving one would eat the other. That's really fucking stupid. For starters, most conjoined twins, at least those who survive into adulthood, share their internal organs. It obviously depends on the severity of the conjoinment, but for the most part, if one dies, they both die. In situations where that wouldn't be the case, then separating the twins is probably a possibility, and one that I think they would always be inclined to go for, since being a conjoined twin fucking sucks. Second, why change the entire plot of the movie to suddenly be about conjoined twins eating each other? What does that have to do with anything? I don't even think a movie could really be made about that. At best, it's a thought experiment, which is exactly how it's presented. Is the demon the boy summoned going to be a Siamese twin? Because I don't think portraying the disabled as demons is exactly politically correct even for 2000. As Lauer is explaining this, he basically goes full sundowner on everyone.
Kids are cruel, Jack. They just lose touch with it at the ripe old age of 12. War crime this, can't eat the drywall that. Microwaving mice is wrong, they said.
In all seriousness though, Peter's actual dialogue here makes Maxor's parody dialogue look like fucking Shakespeare.
Children like violence. They revel in it. Children like to be scared. So we'll scare them, won't we, Johnny?
By the way, the name of the main character is Jonathan.
I think you're pretty fucked up, to be honest. Heh. Oh, I'm fucked up, alright. But you have to be fucked up to survive in this cutthroat world. Literally, right now, I'm gonna show you some pictures that will spark some of your imaginations.
Cringe. Homeboy is not impressing me as a villain. This is super generic, edgy shit that everyone is only on board with because he must have loaded his fucking dice for these charisma rolls. He even gets Johnny Boy to sit down with his pure masculine aura or something. Maybe it's some kind of subtle mind control power, but all that does is raise further questions. I guess it explains why he hasn't been fired yet, but with that sort of influence, I'd probably set my sights a bit higher than making a TV movie on Nickelodeon. So the pictures he shows everyone are of, you guessed it, a dead, mutilated child. And immediately this story goes straight into the dumpster. Look, I wasn't exactly enjoying it before. At best it was generic, and at worst it was cringy, but now it's just sewage. The dead kid opens his eyes and freaks out Jonathan, but no one else reacts at all. I have no idea why Jonathan is the only one who is mostly immune to this guy's mind control powers, except for the fact that he's our main character. Then the kid's eyes are blood, and his blood eyes were black, and the video was so evil that you could smell the blood. It's just like Neil Druckmann showing the animators of The Last of Us 2 actual gore footage to make sure they really got it right. Now shockingly, the story has Jonathan leave and straight up just not come back or push the issue any further. Amazing. I'm so used to creepypasta stories having main characters who keep pushing for more information long after it's become practical to do so. Happy Appy is one of the worst offenders for that. But yeah, he just leaves. He doesn't try to inform the police of anything, even though the guy showed pictures of a child's corpse that are at best stolen crime scene photos and at worst his own work. But you know, the police probably would have been mind controlled anyway, so what does it matter? Only Johnny Boy can resist Peter's persuasive, Giga Chad influence. The movie releases as intended, though it's rushed, which didn't leave much time for editing, and Lauer was able to slip in some hidden frames of more of those gruesome pictures of his, like this is fucking Fight Club or something. Jonathan mentions how he pities the children exposed to those pictures. Not the kids in the pictures? Alright, at least your heart's in the right place. He mentions that this will be the last thing he writes before he slits his throat and kills himself. Which I don't know why he waited nearly 12 years to do this, but okay. I guess even if his heart is in the right place, he's decided that his blood apparently isn't. But before he goes, he mentions some really, really stupid shit. So apparently, Lauer pitched quite a few ideas during these brainstorming sessions of his. These include the boys catching a squirrel and putting it in a glass jar before drowning it, not long before the character of Sandy was introduced on SpongeBob. He also pitched a man who had a squid-like nose, which would go on to seemingly inspire Squidward. Then, it was suggested that the two be stepbrothers, whose mother was eaten by their cannibal weatherman father. Once again inserting his cannibal fetish aside, this was soon adapted into the show with the vaguely premise, Drake and Josh. You know, minus the whole cannibalism part. This keeps going for a while with increasingly stupid premises leading to increasingly more far-fetched TV show connections. But the point is that Lauer's evilness has influenced Nickelodeon years after he left, and perhaps still continues to this day. Ooh. This goes beyond being stupid. It's especially comical considering all of these are just crammed in at the end with absolutely no context aside from one time he brought this up during brainstorming. If these concepts were brought up earlier and then recontextualized through the other shows later, that would at least be something. But no, it's just, oh, by the way, he was also responsible for making all of these completely harmless TV shows. Okay. I mean, in fairness, Dan Schneider was involved in Drake and Josh, so there's no way that was harmless. I guess that's where the real evil of Nickelodeon has been hiding all along. So yeah, this was really bad. It's decently short because the writing is incredibly substandard, but, you know, the writing is incredibly substandard. The initial premise of being an intern at Nickelodeon is a bad enough retread of Squidward's suicide, but to then go the exact same route of being presented with images of dead kids mutilated beyond belief is shameful for multiple reasons. First of all, gross, dude. And second of all, you really couldn't think of anything better to rip off than Squidward's suicide? Something that was already a rip-off of Suicide Mouse, which itself is terrible? At least Squidward's suicide had a sort of mystery element to it, where anyone could have made this terrible episode with these brutal crimes, but this one seeks to explain the mystery of what happened to Crybaby Lane by saying it was all the work of an evil director who hypnotized everyone into being cool with making a murder movie about his cannibalism fetish with his sheer presence of being. But I was immune to it despite being around him longer than anyone else, so just trust me on this one, okay? Also, he pitched a bunch of ideas that eventually got adopted into other TV shows, which really has nothing to do with anything and isn't relevant to anything that's been discussed. Okay, bye, time to kill myself now. The more I look back on it, the more it feels like a fucking fever dream. I wasn't exactly expecting quality. Lost episode pastas are always some of my least favorites for how samey they all are, but this one had some decent potential being based around a piece of real-life lost media, and not some bullshit about how there's a secret episode of Jimmy Neutron that Nickelodeon will never tell you about, made by an evil drug cartel kingpin, where Jimmy gets his entire neighborhood addicted to crack. Oh wait, that one was real. It's one of the few lost media type stories that actually stands a decent chance of having a solid premise, and it blows it on being just like the rest of the shit ones. But I guess that's to be expected. The story was decently popular to my knowledge, and hey, this was 2011. People still thought Squidward's suicide was good then. But what also came in 2011 was the real deal. The actual movie itself was finally rediscovered, and would eventually get so much coverage for being found that Nickelodeon would end up broadcasting it again themselves. You can even find it in its entirety on YouTube and watch it for free, which is incredibly uncharacteristic of Viacom's copyright policies, but it makes editing this video a lot easier on me. All in all, it's a pretty cool series of events that brought this film back to life. So let's take a look at the movie itself that started it all. Here we go. The movie starts off with an old man narrating a tale to two brothers about a family of farmers who ended up having a pair of conjoined twins. Wow, so I guess that means the author of the story must have seen the movie when it aired, or at least heard about it from someone who did if they got that detail right. Obviously the whole self-cannibalism thing is absent, but what does end up being described is still surprisingly grim. Essentially, one of the twins was good and the other was evil, and they soon got sick and died together because they shared the same internal organs. The father was ashamed of the evil twin, and so he had the body sawn in half, separating the two after they died, and he buried the evil twin far away, on a dirt road called Crybaby Lane, where it's said you can still hear the cries of the evil twin. That's pretty messed up for a kid's movie. I can respect that. I always like it when media is able to respect the intelligence of kids, even if it's not something they always deserve. This old man is an Undertaker who the boys are visiting, but it's a late night so they head on home. The younger brother has a nightmare later about the story he was told, and his mother tells him the creepy old Undertaker is a bad influence and not to talk to him anymore. The relationship between the brothers is pretty standard. The older brother Carl is too cool for school and roughs up his kid brother, while the younger brother Andrew is kind of a dweeb who's cramping his style and tells mom that Carl's hogging the Xbox and it's his turn on it now. At least Carl has some good life advice for his little brother.
Life is like wrestling.
I guess life is like wrestling in your case, you know, since you're fictional. Also because you know an Undertaker. I hope he throws Carl off the top of Hell in a Cell by the end of this movie. Later, we see Andrew LARPing Lord of the Rings with his buddy. And this was a year before the Fellowship movie came out, so these kids were out here reading books for fun. No wonder you guys get picked on. And this was 22 years before the terrible new Amazon show. Don't watch it. They turned Sauron into an incel who wants to stick his wiener into glockenspiel. Anyway, Carl is still pissed that Andrew told their parents about going to the Undertaker's place, and devises a plan to help Andrew become cool and get some chicks. That night, they hold a seance with some girls they know. 3 of them, to be exact. For 2 guys. Guess Carl wants to score a 3-way. I can respect his ambition. See, Carl's logic is that the girls will get scared, and girls like being scared. And who else are they gonna have to turn to when scary shit happens? So basically, guys, if you want a girl to like you, isolate her, corner her, and scare the hell out of her. I can see how a teenage jock would come up with this plan. Carl isn't as good as telling the story of the Siamese twins, and one of the girls keeps asking him to cite his sources.
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Also, his incantation to summon the ghost reminds me of Courage the Cowardly Dog.
X-ray, omne, isme, balalay.
Hullabaloo and howdy-do, musty prawns and Timbuktu. Yeltsy bye and hippity-poo. Kick him in the dishpan, hoo hoo hoo. Kick him in the dishpan, hoo hoo hoo.
His prank does end up scaring the girls for a little, but I just kind of end up confused as to the end goal since there's no follow-up. I guess Carl is just a troll. But of course, he summons what seems to be an actual-ass ghost, complete with spooky noises, and also worms! The kids skedaddle before they get turned into worm food, but it seems that an evil has been unleashed on the town, and a dog even turns into the dog from the Goosebumps intro. The next day, the Undertaker starts talking to the Gravedigger. Now there's an interesting crossover event. I think professional wrestling could only stand to benefit from the inclusion of monster trucks. The two find the site of the seance and also the Goosebumps dog, and they manage to any percent speedrun Cujo to get away from it and back to safety, though the Gravedigger does end up hurt. I'm actually kind of shocked that in a horror movie, a car actually managed to start successfully and get away from danger. That's downright amazing. The Undertaker goes over to the boys' house to try and ask them some questions, but the mom wants to talk to his manager, and after he politely informs her that he is the manager, she refuses him entry anyway. Then some girl goes to a lady's house and some worms talk to her. I'm not sure what the hell's going on here. I don't know who these people are. I don't even think they ever really show up again for the rest of the movie. Back at the house of ya boys, there's a good old-fashioned family dinner conversation, and I fucking love how the instant Andrew points out that his dad has said something against his mom, Dad just bails to get out of this argument as fast as possible. The mom honestly reminds me a bit too much of my own mother in this scene, so let's just move on before Freud gets any ideas. Also, speaking of moms, this next scene is just hilarious.
I'm not going out with your mom.
Yeah, but if you married her, you could be my dad.
Leave it to the black kid in this town to not have a dad, I guess. Some things never do change. The plot's honestly gotten a little fuzzy at this point. I'm not sure where anything's even going or why the characters are moving from place to place. Like, Andrew leaves the house to talk to one of the girls. Carl goes with him for some reason. They have to sneak out for some reason, even though I don't think their mom is explicitly preventing them from leaving. It's all just kind of odd. Also, this happens. The radio says there's loads of vandalism going around, and between this and the Goosebumps dog, it's safe to assume that the town is being possessed. Also, there's a small interaction between the parents that's just gold. I can't tell if the dad is an expert at reverse psychology, or if the mom is going out of her way to never listen to a thing her husband tells her. Maybe both.
You smother him.
Oh, because I take an active role in my child's welfare?
Fine, then go check on him.
I don't feel like it.
Yeah.
Not much scary has happened so far, but we've gotten a good amount of laughs. Then the guys are still going off to talk to this girl or something, and they play chicken with an oncoming train, extremely bad idea by the way, and Carl gets teleported away by the worms back to the cemetery. He meets the possessed girls and gets dragged underground. This all happens so fast, it doesn't really get a chance to actually be scary, and the low budget transition effects don't help. By the way, this movie was actually going to be a $10 million theatrical release before its budget was cut down to less than 10% of that, and it was given a TV movie slot. I kind of wonder what the $10 million theatrical version of this might have looked like. Back at home, Dad's watching those monster trucks I was talking about earlier. Mom finds out the kids aren't home, and Dad's reaction is very similar to mine, which is, yeah, so what? Kinda makes me wonder why this is even a plot point. It kind of just feels like padding. So yeah, Carl is possessed too, and leads Andrew away to find the spooky girls since now he knows where they are. And find them they do. After leading Andrew into a pile of what I hope is mud, he takes his clothes and leaves him to have eggs thrown at him by the possessed girls. Well, this is pretty mean. I sure hope it doesn't get worse than— oh, they sick a bull on him too. So I guess between this and the impromptu off-road trucking from earlier, we have 2 counts of attempted murder here. This ghost is pretty hardcore. Andrew escapes and after running through town, manages to find some clothes, but ends up outside of the house of some possessed pyromaniac hillbillies. Now that's a movie in and of itself right there. Where the hell was this in the creepypasta? Andrew makes it back to the Undertaker, who's trying to deal with a family of— wait a second, is that Jim Gaffigan? Huh. I guess this really is a comedy. I do like how the Undertaker is annoyed by this business transaction going sour. Yeah, find me a nice cardboard box for this smelly old stiff. That should keep his fucking family happy. So it turns out the reason everything's been going tits up is because when the father separated the twins, he mixed them up and they got put in the wrong graves. So the seance woke up the evil twin. Ordinarily, I'd ask how you could possibly fuck something up like that, but knowing this guy kept his deformed kids locked away for their entire lives and cut them in half when they died, I wouldn't be surprised if he just named them Lefty and Righty and got them mixed up all the time. Also, the Undertaker reveals he's the one who separated the bodies, so he knows all of this to be true. He figures if he can awaken the spirit of the good twin, that'll balance everything out. But of course, here comes Mom to ruin all the fun and take Andrew home.
Oh, just you wait until I get a hold of your manager.
Lady, I already told you I am the manager. Naturally, Mom has no idea that Carl is possessed, and the demon Carl plays suck-up to sow discord and mistrust among the family. Classic demon stuff. Undertaker goes back to Gravedigger to find out what's what, and it turns out that when Carl plucked a random root out of the ground over the grave so we could hide his speaker under it, that's what set the ghost loose. I guess that's one way to do it. He's about to leave when he gets accosted and robbed of his ring by the possessed little LARPer kid. So the black kid has no father and beats up old white men and steals their shit. Ah, the 2000s. You can get away with so much back then. I take back what I said about the political correctness earlier. This is great. Also, he's an old man who took quite the fall here. I'm putting that as attempted murder count number 3. Maybe even successful murder. I don't know. Andrew once again escapes the house before he can be killed by evil Carl, issuing attempted murder number 4. Seriously, Mom, just put a lock on the window or something. And he runs all the way back to the Undertaker, which makes the whole Mom picking him up subplot feel kind of pointless. Thankfully, Undertaker's still alive, and asks for coffee instead of a doctor, like a true Chad, and charges young Andrew to go to Crybaby Lane before either dying for real or passing out. I can't tell. Undertaker's nephew doesn't seem even remotely concerned and offers to drive Andrew out of there. Oh yeah, and he doesn't have a license. So naturally, the one cop in this population 30 town catches them, but he's possessed, so it's totally fine to try and outrun him. They do their best, but the cop rams the hell out of them in what can definitely be counted as attempted murder number 5. Man, we're on a roll with these lately. They manage to lose him, but end up lost, and drive through one of Iowa's finest cornfields to try and lose the possessed townspeople on their trail, including a possessed farmer and a giant combine. Naturally, they run away from it in a straight line, because of course they do, and we get attempted murder count number 6 as the doofy nephew is potentially skewered by the combine. Then, Andrew is surrounded by all the possessed girls who want him to kiss a girl with the creepy bug in her mouth, and when that doesn't work, they send in a girl who looks about 6'5" to commit attempted murder number 7. But luckily, Andrew hits her with one of his brother's famous pro wrestling moves and knocks her down, and finally finds the good twin's grave at Crybaby Lane. That's the name of the movie! He tries pulling out the rope, but the evil twin just says, nope, and warps him back to his own grave. Hey, they brought that back, and the ghost actually did it at an opportune time. Now it's time for you to get eaten by the ground, Andrew. And look who's here underground. It's the evil twin, being just a creepy weirdo who eats worms. Andrew's trapped underground, stuck in a grave with a whole-ass skeleton in it, and almost gets possessed before scaring off the ghost and pulling out the root in the good skeleton's chest cavity, just managing to avoid getting buried alive in the process. You know what? I feel like the creepypasta could have done something with this. Like, it was the last scene they filmed, and they actually buried him alive to get the shot just right. We know the author at least has some recollection of the plot. That'd be neat. And for a kids movie, this is pretty striking and stressful imagery. I dig it. And the ending is just about how you'd expect. Andrew survives getting buried alive, gets the girl, saves the day, the doofy nephew survived getting skewered, Carl and Andrew reconcile their differences, and everyone gets over their possessions with no memory of what happened. Even the Undertaker survived, and Carl goes on to LARP with the kid who almost murdered him. And LARPing is a lot like professional wrestling, so I guess in the end, that's the through line for his character arc. And that's the movie. Everyone lives happily ever after. That's about what I expected of a kids movie, and I guess that kinda goes for a lot of this. Now, objectively speaking, it's the best Halloween movie we have ever watched on the channel by a country mile. But do I prefer it over the sheer stupidity of the raking? Not really. It's a perfectly acceptable, made-for-TV kids movie that has a story of recovery far more interesting than the one it presents itself. It's not bad, and if I'd watched it as a kid, I might have even liked it. But it wasn't particularly scary, the plot really meandered, and I didn't know which way it was going for a while. And I feel like this could have just as easily been a half-hour episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark, with all the fat trimmed. I guess that's ironic considering how much the movie was already originally downsized. But is it more enjoyable than the creepypasta? Oh yeah, that's not even close. There were some genuine laughs in there, and while the low budget held the movie back in a lot of places like special effects and editing, the practical stuff that's there is still pretty good. The Combine ramming the hearse, the whole police chase, and Andrew getting buried alive is some nice stuff. The acting ranges from serviceable to pretty good. The little LARPer kid is probably the worst one, but he's also the youngest, so that makes sense. There's not much in the way of character arcs or development really, outside of the two brothers just kinda learning to like each other. And they and the Undertaker are the only ones who seem to have actual character traits. But the story wasn't terrible. It got dark in places, and while slow to get going, had a decent climactic finale. I think with some tweaking, this could be pretty good, but it's very middle of the road and definitely a kids' TV movie. I think it's just funny that, even with all that said, it still ends up being miles better than the creepypasta, which is derivative, generic, uninspired, tasteless, and embarrassing. Its only purpose is as a small historical footnote in the tale of this film's recovery that helped get it the notoriety it needed to eventually be rediscovered and finally rebroadcast for the world to see. And hey, it didn't hurt Peter Lauer's career any, so that's nice. When he was asked about the movie, he was kind of flattered that so many people expressed interest in it. He thought it was just a failure and moved on with his life. For a lot of people, the discovery of Crybaby Lane was one of the biggest accomplishments in all of lost media archiving. But for him, it was just another movie before he moved on to his next project. I can respect the grind, my man. And now it's time for me to do the same. I retreat now into my cold pit of soil, to return when I am least expected. But you can be sure you'll see me here next Halloween. Until then.